Hello and welcome to Tim Farmer's Country Kitchen. We're in northern Kentucky in Cincinnati. Now you saw our show where we went to the festival and we really started wanting to know the history. And I found Dan. You've written several books on this. I have so many questions for you. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
The history in this area. Once we went to the festival, once my eyes were opened to the huge influx of German culture from, really it started in the 1830s. There was already maybe 5% population of Germans in the 1830s to 1855. What happened during that period?
So between 1830 and 1855, there was something in Germany called the War of 1848.
Gotcha.
And so that was basically the serfs, the peasants, and kind of the intelligentsia rebelling against the barons and the nobles of Germany. Well, they lost, and they came all over here in droves between 1848 and 1855. And they settled here in northern Kentucky and Newport, Covington, and Dayton, all the little communities across the river from Cincinnati, which was kind of a bustling town.
So what does that have to do with Tim Farmer's Country Kitchen? Well, once we did our last show, we just peeled one layer off the onion and I started realizing how deep this culture was. We wanted to explore some restaurants around the area and some history. So we're going to talk a little bit of history, and then we'll come back and visit a place and then back and forth, but so on and so forth. So all this German influx. Now, I love German culture, period. I love their food, their beer, everything about it. So how did that affect in this particular area? There was, a lot of people didn't take too kindly to that.
That's right. When they first came, there was a American political party called the Know Nothings.
Right.
And they were very anti-immigrant, and that included the Germans, the recently arrived Germans, as well as the Irish. But the Germans really came in droves here in northern Kentucky and Cincinnati, and in some statistics, about 75% of people living either on this side of the river in Kentucky or the other side of the river in Cincinnati can claim that German heritage.
Right. So a lot of these were skilled craftsmen, artisans, and they didn't have any trouble finding work and creating shops, and many butchers, trained folks came in, and wasn't there kind of a triangle, and was Cincinnati that, tell us about the triangle.
So the German triangle, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Milwaukee.
Right.
So that's really where the Germans came, and different periods of time and different types of Germans. So we were probably the earliest in Cincinnati because we were one of the first big cities west of the Alleghenies. So we had the early Germans, the northern and southern Germans, and then as kind of the eastern Germans came closer to World War I, they settled in Milwaukee and St. Louis. And so as they came, they brought their culinary traditions from the various regions. And so you bring all those culinary traditions together and they sort of morph together and create a regional specific thing that's based on an old German tradition that they brought.
What's all this butchery going on in here, and the pork, and what did they used to call it?
Yeah, so there's great stories about the sausages of Cincinnati and Geta and some of the other meat products that were based on, have German ancestors, but really became their own regionally when they hit Cincinnati. So Geta is a very interesting thing. It's basically what's called a grain sausage or a slaughter sausage. So it was made at the time that a pig was slaughtered. Back in Germany, you'd have a pig that was slaughtered in the fall, and the good cuts of meat would be divided and given to the baron. Of course, the Bauer, or the farm people, the serfs, they'd get the offcuts of meat. So they had to do something with it. They'd get a head, they'd get some organ meat, the hoofs, the trotters, and so they'd take that meat and they'd extend it with grains. And so what Geta is pork and beef mixed with what we call pinhead oatmeal, which is something native to the northern Kentucky region that was also made by a German immigrant.
So this is really filling, and it really stretches it out, makes it last longer?
Right.
It's everything but the squeal in there, right?
It is. It used to be. So nowadays we use, because we can, we use good cuts of meat. We use typically pork shoulder and good ground beef, onions, pinhead oatmeal, and every family has their own way to kind of spice it.
So let's talk about, I think 1852. There was a market that was established that still stands today. Tell us about the beginnings up to now.
So Cincinnati, northern Kentucky, almost every public square had its own market. we're lucky to have one of those historic markets, which is Finley Market, over in the Over the Rhine neighborhood of Cincinnati, which was traditionally the German neighborhood. It was kind of west of Liberty, which was where the city ended in about 1852. So all the German immigrants kind of congregated around that area around Finley, and Finley was just a cornucopia of butchers and bakers and sausage producers and people that made pickles and sauerkraut.
Can you imagine the smells? Wouldn't you like to walk through there in 1852?
Wouldn't that have been great?
So all this was going on in an open air market and in storefronts as well?
Right, and so really Finley is the last kind of legacy of those markets that were dotted all throughout the cities here in northern Kentucky and in Cincinnati. And it's very much the way it used to be. It's all independent, small vendors that have a stall. There are some legacy butchers that have been there for 2 and 3 generations that are still doing these traditional sausages, mets and brats.
All right, Finley Market, 1852. Let's see what it looks like today.